president of the United Democratic Movement, Bantu Holomisa, along with the leaders of 5 other political parties, wrote to the Chief Justice urging him to mediate negotiations between parties with the aim to forge a government of national unity. Bantu Holomisa and Build One South Africa leader Mmusi Maimane now joins me. Thank you so much for joining us, General. Really do appreciate it. Let's talk about the letter. Why the Chief Justice?
Well, we felt that we should approach the Chief Justice because we couldn't approach the ANC after they made that announcement. Normally, if the president had made that announcement in his capacity as a head of state, we would have written to him. But it is important that people should know that the ANC has been engaged with other political parties in negotiations. And everybody was expecting that possible there will be a coalition established. But when they announced that there will be a government of national unity, it meant therefore everybody must be consulted as to how will this work, the rules and regulations, how are we going to work in Parliament and so on. People must not forget that plus minus 9 million people, voters, have said no to the current state of affairs. Therefore, the ANC at least should have had a courtesy to call everyone. Has
the ANC not done that? I mean, you have a collegial relationship with the ANC. You play golf with the president. Surely he could have picked up the phone and said, hey, we're having these conversations. We'd like you to be a part of it.
No, there's no need. We were not expecting to be called. But when it comes to the question of government of national unity, it means a different game altogether. However, we did write to the Chief Justice, and his office has acknowledged receipt, and we are still waiting for a formal response. However, yesterday afternoon, early evening, the president called me to say is it not going to be difficult that we involve the Chief Justice? I understood where he came from, but the reason why we went to the route of the Chief Justice, we don't have a speaker today where we would have gone to. So de facto, Chief Justice is the speaker. After all, he is preparing to swear in members of Parliament in few days' time. So it was relevant. However, the Chief Justice, if he wishes to assist this process, he can still appoint a team of other legal fraternity or retired judges, but at least if it is monitored from that office, all what we want is a forum where the ANC will be given an opportunity to make a presentation to the parties which represent 60% of the voters as a result of the recent election. So we are merely asking for them to come and make a presentation. After that, this is what I expect, is that the president or the ANC can go to each political party if they are interested to engage them bilaterally. But at least everybody would have known what is the roadmap going forward.
Mmusi Maimane, the leader of Build One South Africa, is also a part of this conversation. Mmusi, this must be noted, and it's clearly important that we start the conversation here. There's absolutely no statutory provision anywhere in the Constitution that empowers the Chief Justice or any judicial actor to act on behalf of the judiciary in non-judicial matters. This, of course, is a non-judicial matter. There's no application before any court. It's not a litigious matter. And many are concerned that this may compromise the judiciary and the Chief Justice if these negotiations don't go well, particularly if it does eventually become some sort of litigious matter. I'm sure if a government of national unity is formed, some sort of agreement of sorts will be signed by all those signing on to the government of national unity. An agreement is somewhat of a legally binding document to an extent, and it could become the basis of litigation at some point. And if it does, the Chief Justice would not be able to preside over that, given that he presided and mediated as an interlocutor over these negotiations. Do you not perhaps, as someone who co-signed this letter, feel that, like the President had asked Bantu Holomisa here, should someone else not perhaps mediate these conversations?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to fellow South Africans. The consensus that we have as the people of this country is built on the Constitution of the Republic. It's both the agreement that members of Parliament take oath to, but it's equally the vision where this country is, at least all political parties who subscribe to constitutionalism, take lead from. You know, the Constitution has at least some obligatory agreements we can put forward, provision of housing, education, etc. The best protector of that document is the Constitutional Court. And given the fact that the Chief Justice has now got the list of members of Parliament, it would be helpful for them to be able to, or a person designate, to be able to say, let's chair a meeting with 18 political parties, leaders, to have a frank discussion about what needs to happen in a manner that says, let there be a binding agreement over a period of time. It's a way of re-entrenching and reinforcing constitutionalism going forward. And if the Chief Justice feels that it would be judicial overreach, I think the principle must not be lost that says the person with authority in the country, typically, you'd be someone of the leader of government business, but because of the system we've had, it would be then the deputy president, which is an ANC person, that you can't simply chair a meeting objectively. The second point I want to make is this, is that why put a GNU? It would be like literally putting a bunch of actors together without a script. Let's decide the script and then decide who plays which role. The script is about how do we deliver prosperity for South Africans, ensure parliament that works,
Mmusi,
ethical leaders, etc.
Mmusi, are you not perhaps naively hoping that the presence of the Chief Justice in the room will bring about some sort of moral stature that would mitigate against everyone else's ego in the negotiating room?
It's not naivety, it's a constitutionalism. It's about ensuring that the Constitution remains the supreme law of the land. And any action that you take must be able to uphold that. Because if you, on the onset, in a unique space, and by the way, I think we must be careful to stop using language like government of national unity, despite that it's been used. This is a grand coalition. And if we frame it that way, then we need to understand that it's going to have consequences for the 60 million South Africans. As things stand at the moment, there is no executive that is neutral, and there's no parliament that is neutral. So we need to find the neutral body, which is the judicial, or the judiciary designate in this instance. So I really believe that we mustn't overplay the notion that says that this is interference by the judiciary. We are merely trying to achieve a space upon which we do what is right and what is fair for 60 million South Africans. Because otherwise, what's happening now, and I can tell you this, Oliver, you need to know this, is that there are already bilaterals that are taking place. Those bilaterals are what are they discussing other than positions?
Yeah,
they're not discussing 60 million South Africans.
General, you participated in the negotiated settlement, and that at the time was one of the actors and presiders thereover was Rolf Meyer, who later joined your party and coalesced with the UDM. At the time, it was all the parties coming together to negotiate this, and there was a negotiated interim constitution at the time where some of these constitutional values were being espoused. So to that extent, I can see the role the judiciary would play here, but the religious community also played an incredibly important role at the time. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, for instance, being an important figure in bringing political parties and people with divergent views together into one room and coalescing and selling the dream of a rainbow nation. Why not the religious community? Why not Bishop Thabo Makgoba?
Well, firstly, let me remind you and our audience, the conflict between black and white, militarily speaking, in this country, there was no winner. South Africa was a winner. And there were meetings which preceded the elections of 1994. and everybody agreed about the way forward. Hence, we had an interim constitution. The ANC won with big numbers, but still, in the spirit of the negotiations, they felt that they must have a government of national unity. Those discussions were between political parties, in particular between ANC and a national party, and later Kosibuteles of IFP. The religious leaders played their role through and through before even political parties, politicians were released and unbanned. So they continued, but as you know, after 1994, they disappeared. And the whole role of they were playing as a sector tended to be blurred, lines were blurred because some of them were appointed in the government. So we would have to ask which ones. I cannot name who would do that, but in principle, yes, the civil sector, the civil society can play a role in this, but key to the success of the negotiations in 1992, 93, up to 94, is that the two parties, ANC and National Party leaders, were in agreement. They talked to each other. Now you have two main parties, that is ANC and
the DA to an extent.
DA, and then you have the
EFF and MK party.
EFF, but MK and ANC. If I were to advise, in the spirit of non-interference in their conflict, would be for the ANC and MK leaders to meet, or the leadership, let's put it that way, to meet and agree in a way that this government of national unity, if they want to go that route, I thought they were going to talk about forming a coalition. Today we would know who's going to do what. But the issue of government of national unity, you have heard the MK is already rejecting it. The EFF has already rejected that. But that means, therefore, someone, whether it's the Chief Justice or it's church leaders or whoever, must bring those people under one roof. But before you do that, let the key leaders, I say it again, MK leaders and ANC leadership must sit together and say, comrades, the internal conflicts we have been having have spilled out and they're affecting the whole process. Let those two meet. I'm sure we can.
In the forming of a government of national unity, to use Mmusi's words, a grand coalition, do you trust the ANC to be an honest negotiator? Is that in part what motivated to perhaps involve the judicial?
That's precisely why we didn't want to take instructions from the ANC, because that was a decision of the NEC. But we are trying to help Cyril when we said, broaden this, call everybody, and let somebody mediate. But I explained it to him, and he agreed that there is a need that all parties must sit together and find a solution. All what we want, ANC must just outline what is this GNU, what does it mean, and then let the other parties go back to their institutions and to their separate corners and come up and say, yes, we say yes to this. Or ANC, you can go ahead with your bilaterals.
Mmusi, the deadline, technically speaking, for when the first sitting of Parliament should be formed, where of course we will be electing the Speaker and subsequently the President, is next week Sunday. I've never known Parliament to sit on a Sunday, so it would probably be on a Friday. And so there's about a week left, just about, for all these negotiations to happen and to conclude. Do you trust that we will be able to reach some sort of clarity as a country about what direction we're going in? Or do you think that these negotiations, because it's a grand coalition as you describe it, these negotiations may become protracted?
No, and that's why I think the process as we've outlined gives us the easiest pathway to achieve that. Because you have an opportunity now to do two things: harmonize many of the manifestos. That is a work that can be done through sufficient research to achieve, perhaps, if you like, the 10 or 15 objectives that the seventh administration must come up with. Secondly, to stress test those against the Constitution so that no one wants to do things that are illegal. For example, you can't say you are going to forego the fight against corruption as an argument. And then thirdly, so that when members of parliament are sworn in on the 18th, hopefully, because the 17th is a public holiday, is for them to be able to say, we swear an oath to a constitution that we've now said the plan for the seventh administration sits thereof. So that when we walk out of the 18th, even if there could be protracted conversations about what legal processes are undertaken from there, what budgets are passed, we're at least clear what the nature of the plan is. The other point I want to make, Oliver, which is absolutely crucial, you will make a grand mistake by creating a government of national unity that is without opposition. When I speak on behalf of BOSA, we've made it very clear that we are coming to Parliament. The mandate the South Africans have given us is to say, go and enforce a vision of building one South Africa, hold the government to account because we don't have a majority, ensure that where the government does the right things, now we don't know what those right things are because we haven't had this conversation, you support, but when they do things that are wrong, you hold them to account. Because if you don't have an opposition, you will effectively then end up in a state where you've got a democratically elected dictatorship because of a grand coalition. And that has many risks for South Africans. Let us not make these mistakes, because the error that Zimbabwe made in 2007 was to create this GNU, and look where Zimbabwe is at.
Yeah.
Let us learn from other countries and do the right things here.
General Holomisa, the letter you wrote was undersigned by yourself and 5 other political parties, so 6 parties in total, with those parties cumulatively have a seat allocation of 12 seats in Parliament. I can't help but notice that there are some opposition parties that are not undersigning this. Action SA, Al Jamaa, the Patriotic Alliance, Freedom Front Plus. I presume you picked up the phone and called everyone. What did they say to you when you called them? Because it gives the impression that not all of the opposition parties, especially the smaller parties, and by smaller parties I mean parties with less than 10 seats, not all of them buy into this idea.
The meeting was called initially to discuss the problems we have with IEC, which has not answered the queries which were raised during the election.
Yeah.
But because a day before the meeting set yesterday, we heard this announcement by the GNU, we resolved that the issues related to IEC must go through the legal route, that is Electoral Court. But we discussed the issue of GNU, which was never in the original agenda of ours. But be that as it may, the bottom line now is that we have to look at the period. Can we produce a government of national unity or a coalition between now and the 17th of this month?
So it's purely by coincidence that these are the parties that signed it. It's nothing, not as though the other parties are disagreeing with you.
No, we didn't engage them on these issues. But since it was a current issue, we had to discuss it, and we resolved that let's refer it to the Chief Justice, who is a de facto, whether you like it or agree with me, de facto speaker as we speak.
Yeah. Mmusi, we've seen in several instances in South Africa where parties, especially the bigger parties in a negotiating pot, were not able to trust each other and trust each other with power and not be able to find each other. And so they typically hand the reins to a neutral, a neutral political actor. In the city of Johannesburg, at some point it was Al Jamaa. In fact, it is Al Jamaa. In Nelson Mandela Bay, it was at some point the UDM, and these sort of compromises do sort of happen. If we're unable to form a government where the other parties can't find each other and they all feel like they're not going to get what they want, what is your thinking around such a compromise where you give the executive to a smaller party, you give the legislature or at least the speaker seats to another smaller party, and have a band of parties with less skin in the game, so to speak, be the sort of mediators between the bigger political parties?
Yeah, I think that is an option that is available in this instance. The only caveat I would put is, let's not apply simply just the principle of neutral player. You know, the African Union in some ways is structured in a similar way, where the smaller countries have a voice where they can lead in the African Union so as to produce that sense of neutrality. But competence, we are not discussing here a situation where we could end up just saying, for compromise sake, let's just hand it to a small party. And you could end up with the person of the president or the person of finance ministry who hasn't got the requisite competence to represent our country. It is crucial that if you are to achieve that mandate be clarified, competence be put on the table, that person would uphold what would be, and I want to stress this again, Oliver, what would be an agreed upon plan? Because State of the Nation is merely a reflection or a tabling of that plan and the annual review thereof. And if we don't have that sort of plan, you are going to end up in a scenario where voters can't hold citizens to account, and ultimately you end up with governing worse. And we mustn't forget that we've come through a treacherous 15 years. We are unemployed, we have no lights, there are so many issues that this country faces. The last thing we need is to be able to end up in a scenario as to impart what is going on in Johannesburg as we sit here today. So this is an important, delicate thing about adequate leadership that can take this country forward and uphold that plan going to ensure that the 60 million South Africans can prosper through it.
Just lastly, Mmusi, if a government of national unity doesn't come about, some other model through some process of elimination may come about. One of the modalities is potentially, in what looks like a government of national unity, which is a lot more friction, is a minority government. In that instance, or even in the instance that a government of national unity does come about, do you believe that all participating parties in such a grand coalition agreement should have representation in cabinet?
No.
Well, I think there's two routes here. We can either go the ANC's formulation of the GNU. We can also look at a grand opposition that puts the ANC in opposition. That's an option, because 60% of South Africans took a different view on this issue. That can be a conversation. But to the third bit is about ensuring that whatever happens, you look at both aspects. Both the aspects of the executive in how that's constituted, and that could be an exercise by the largest minority party, and then look at the accountability in the official opposition that will come on board.
General Holomisa, you disagree with that? You wouldn't want a cabinet position? Nelson Mandela famously called you a coup specialist. You wouldn't want to be the Minister of Defense?
No, let's talk serious politics here. I think we don't have time, and I wish that those who are negotiating currently should instead opt for the coalition route, because the route of government of national unity might take a little bit longer. But if we don't agree as a country, obviously the Constitution says we must go to elections again, snap elections. But we have budget for that, because we need money to go and address the crisis we have along the coast as a result of
this election cost 2.3 billion rand.
So, but the leadership of this country must just swallow their pride. Those who have numbers, they must find a solution as soon as possible, and that the government operates. But the ANC must not pretend as if they have won elections. They must listen to the views of other parties.
General, just a last question. You have 3 seats allocated to you. You wrote a letter to the IEC last week saying that you don't understand why it's only 3 seats given the amount of votes you got, and you broke down the ratio. That they give you a satisfactory answer to that?
No. It's part of the complaints we are filing with the rest of other parties.
So you're still waiting for an answer about why you only have 3 seats given the number of votes you have?
Yeah, they tried to give a fictitious answer, but we said no, we are not happy with
According to your calculation,
but
how many seats is it supposed to be?
We are not going to waste our time on that. we might have to settle with what they are telling us. But the bigger picture now is the establishment of government so that we bring stability and make sure that the team which will lead South Africa from now on, please, they mustn't bring people who are still part of the Zondo Commission's findings. They must try and clean that mess, reinforce with other parties they are negotiating with, and we run with the ball.
Yeah. General Holomisa, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Mmusi Maimane, leader of BOSA, thank you once again for your time this evening. Really do appreciate it.